Earth, Wind, and Fire on WVON Black Music Month. We're playing Earth, Wind, and Fire.
What a good way to start the day.
All day, actually, we're going to be playing Earth, Wind, and Fire. I was alone and took a ride, didn't know what I'd find. Salim, you know this music all too well, my brother.
All too well, my brother. I mean, that time for black music was a glorious period, man, you know, because it infused political activism, spiritual aspiration, and, you know, amazing musical chops all at the same time. It was an incredible time, man. It really was.
It really was. And, you know, you think about Earth, Wind, and Fire, you think about some of the groups that came out. You know, Earth, Wind, and Fire started, late 60s, early 70s.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I was thinking Sly and the Family Stone. I mean, you know, you had some music coming in the 70s.
Oh, man, for real.
70s just brought
path-breaking stuff,
man. Oh, man, Marvin Gaye. I mean, you know, Jackson 5 came out, 70, 71. I mean, music was just
Cool in the Gang,
yep.
which made that transition from jazz to you know, funk in a kind of serious way. It was all kind of musical exploration going on.
Man, Marvin Gaye. I mean, you just go on and on. It was just an amazing time, my brother. I've got a phone call on because I was talking about your thoughts about, you know, T.O. Hardiman's situation. I know it all kind of caught us off guard when we heard it. I reached out to T.O., text him. He texted me back. You know, I'd like to get him on so he can kind of, you know, say his side to whenever a story like this comes out. Whenever somebody gets arrested and they're high-profile personality like T.O.'s been in the news, you know, there's always this immediate reaction to, you know, kind of find somebody guilty of whatever they've been charged with. In reality, the justice system doesn't work like that. He's been arrested. He's been charged. And now he gets to defend himself. And when he came out yesterday, you know, he said, I'm innocent of domestic battery charges, you know, but he talked about, you know, his experience being in locked up and everything. I want to, you know, I just said, as somebody who has had him on the show, in all fairness, you know, I try to get a brother the benefit of the doubt because it's, and not saying that this is the case, but it's easy. I can have David arrested if I wanted to. Just call the cops and say that he hit me. You know what I mean? So,
especially somebody like David, a rough and tough cat like that.
I know, right? So, you know, that is my statements. And I know some women are going to take that the wrong way. And you should not. It is what it is, because there are a lot of women out there that understand how that false accusation can come out as well. Now, this may not be a false act. Maybe T.O. is guilty of it, but it's going to have to play its way out of this court system, and he'll have his day in court. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'll leave it at that, man. Yeah. I really, because, you know, once it gets into that legal realm, it gets sticky.
It does, and I know we got a couple phone calls. So before we get into some of our conversation, because I did want to ask you a couple of things and see what was on your mind. Especially, I know you've got some strong opinion about Bradley Manning, and his trial starts today. So I did want to get your opinion on that. But let's go to Lee on the South Side first. Lee, good morning. You're on WVON.
Good morning. How are you?
Wonderful.
Morning.
I'm not angry about anything, and I'm not saying who is guilty and who's not. But this is what I'm saying. As a community-based radio station and a community of women who are and have been subjected to domestic violence, that you guys should take a position where you're sensitive to the point that when these situations arise, and as you know, domestic violence transcends race, economic status, political status, all of that. Formulate a position.
You know what, Lee, it's really hard to hear you. Your phone is breaking up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, all I'm saying is formulate what I consider an unbiased statement. I feel your statements are very biased, and I wish you would.
I think that's about as unbiased as you can get when you say, "Hey, it may be true, it may not be true." I'm unbiased when I
plant the seed. You plant the seed. Well, I don't know. Well, maybe he's not. No, you don't have to say any of that. He was charged with it.
All right.
Well, out in the court. Period.
Well, he's already guilty in the court of public opinion. So what I'm doing is I'm pushing. Yes, he is. So what I'm doing is just.
As a man, you you already
Lee, I'm just
people
pushing
have
back.
judged
I'm bringing
him.
all I
And
said.
that's not true.
I think
What
you're being.
I'm saying as a woman, that you've already judged the woman as being lying, or you said, women can put bruises on themselves, and then you highlighted this extreme case.
Yes.
So I'm just saying, I think you should really try
a
community-based radio station.
Okay, I'll try to do that.
Not to come up with these bias slants that you always come up with that really lead against women.
All right, well, Lee, let me ask you a question. All right. Did you come up with an opinion when you heard that he was arrested for domestic battery?
No, I didn't come up with an opinion.
Well, hold on. Let me ask you. Let me just ask you a question.
No, I didn't.
Did you think there's a possibility that he's innocent of these charges?
Yeah.
Did you? Okay, well then you are a fair and unbiased person, and that's all I'm trying to do as well. All I said was that there's a possibility. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt since T.O.'s been on the show, and I consider him to be a responsible person. I know this doesn't look good for him, and I said very clearly he may be guilty, and I said he may not be guilty. Let's just give him the benefit of the doubt. Because he deserves that opportunity. If he'd have came out and said, "Hey, you know what? I need to apologize to all the young people who I mentor and tell them to resolve conflict in a better way. I didn't do it. I'm embarrassed. Yada yada." Then we could surmise that he's guilty of it. But if the guy comes out and says he's innocent, then you got to give him the benefit of the doubt. All I was doing is when he came out and said that, hey, this is going to clear itself out. I'm innocent of these battery charges. Then that's when I take the position of, hey, let's give a brother the benefit of the doubt. That's all. And I've seen it. And as a community-based radio station, I will not only say that domestic violence is wrong and speak to that issue, but also, and we have a lot of women who listen to this radio station, and I'll be very supportive of speaking against domestic violence. But for the men out there that have been victims of false allegations of domestic violence, I will speak to their voice as well. So that is my responsibility as a radio host, because it happens both ways, and these phone lines will light up with a lot of brothers who will say that, just like a lot of sisters who will call in and say that they have been abused. Both sides need attention on that conversation. So I'm giving both sides. Domestic violence is wrong. If T.O. Hartman did this, he's wrong. If he's innocent, he deserves his opportunity to state his case. All right. Let's see. Salim, we've got a couple of calls about the state of Black Chicago. I didn't attend that. What happened and how was it?
Well, it was an ambitious effort on the part of Clerk Dorothy Brown, and you really have to give her kudos for putting it together. And they really tried to do a classy job, and for the most part, they succeeded. There were some problems, but it's difficult always, man, when you get a lot of people who have a lot of very powerful ideas together to deliver their ideas in a way that is substantial and not simply crowd pleasing. And sometimes because some of the response time was limited, people were inclined, and also there was motivation and an incentive to be rhetorically provocative, so that you can get the crowd up and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So there was some of that going on. I used to always object to that about when Tavis used to have his things, his meetings, and folks, would get on and they would be judged according to how rhetorically and provocative or flowery they could be. So there was that, but there was a very serious attempt to focus on 9 problem areas, which I think were pretty insightful, distinction, and a lot of knowledgeable people, man. So I think a lot of people got much out of it. The question is will there be any, will there be any follow-up, any significant follow-up? Because as I pointed out, because I was involved in one of the panels, which incidentally was moderated by our own Cliff Kelly, will there be the kind of follow-up that makes this more distinctive than usual? Because I've been on at least involved in at least 100 of these kinds of gatherings, and what happens is there's initial traditionally there's an initial burst of enthusiasm. And maybe it may last for a month or two, but then it's not sustainable. There's not a kind of self-sustainable mechanism in place, and that's what they're trying to do here. And that will be, the proof of the pudding if they can keep that going, because it is extremely important what the folks are talking about.
Now, what panel were you on that Cliff moderated?
It was called a keynote panel. It was a group of folks who were kind of summing up everything.
All right.
And so that's what we did. But there were panels on. There were 9. There were 9 focus areas.
I'm gonna have you go over a couple of those when we come back.
Okay.
719 on WVON. Salim MuWakkil on the live and talking about the state of Black Congress that met on Saturday. Salim was on one of the panel. Cliff Kelly moderated one, Gerard McClendon, and a lot of, like Salim said, a lot of smart brothers out there and sisters out there giving some opinion, giving some thought, giving some knowledge, what comes of it, and what was accomplished. And can you keep something like this going? Like Salim said, he's been on 100 of these panels, part of 100 of these conversations. What can make a conversation like this actually stick? We'll agree that it's good to talk about it, but is there any action plan after we have the conversations and start identifying what some of the problems are? 591-1690. We've got phone calls. David's coming up next with traffic and weather on the morning show. I tell you, the unmistakable voice of Maurice White will be able forever connected with Earth, Wind, and Fire. Him and Philip Bailey, no doubt about it. Earth, Wind, and Fire, our feature artist this morning. Black Music Month kicks off right here on WVON with the morning show. Salim MuWakkil, my guest, talking about the state of Black Chicago Congress, state of Black Chicago Congress that went on yesterday. You talk about the 9 issues. What were a couple of them, Salim, that we can at least chit chat about for a minute here?
Well, educational access and resources, business development and opportunity, youth engagement and leadership development.
Oh, that's a key.
That's a key.
That is a key right there, because that's an area where I see other communities kind of getting ahead of the African American community. I talk about the Hispanic community, and I talk about them with all respect, because they've done a very good job of engaging young people, getting them focused on two strong. Well, number one, getting them focused on family, the family unit, getting them focused on education, getting them focused on business and politics. And I mean, really getting these young Hispanics engaged in a very strong way. They recognize how you move the ball in America, and they are training their young people to do exactly that. We're the community that are kind of struggling with that. We've got a lot of good, young, talented people out there in our community that are going to school and doing the right thing and making the right decisions. I don't know if we're doing a good job, though, of getting them and help giving them a head start. I don't know.
Well, one of the things when I was a young reporter, and I was working for the AP, virtually the entire area of New Jersey, northern New Jersey, as my beat, so to speak. And I would spend a lot of time in wealthy white neighborhoods, and that is notoriously the bedroom community of Manhattan, those parts of New Jersey. And so whenever you would go in the wealthiest communities, the first thing that you would notice, man, is how child-oriented they were. Everything was oriented toward education. The school was the center of all kinds of civic activity. There were playgrounds and other kinds of structure, infrastructure devoted to guiding youth in a certain direction. And so that really made a strong impression on me. I also noticed that the Nation of Islam also had similar kinds of emphasis the focusing on young people, drill teams, trying to get young people interested in martial arts, things that attract young masculine energy, and converting it to something that is community oriented or beneficial to the culture in general. And that's really what people do when they have secure communities that are devoted to healthy sustenance. They begin to focus on young people. So you're absolutely absolutely right, man. That youth engagement and leadership development is an important piece. And I was really impressed with some of the participants, like Lance Williams. That brother's from Northeastern Illinois University, the center on the Center for Inner City Study, Carruthers Center. That he's doing some good stuff with these young cats and young sisters who are trying to transmute some of this anger and angst about the community violence into some sustainable activities and a new focus on how to look at our young people rather than as deficits but as assets. An asset-based conception of how we deal with things rather than a deficit model. And some very interesting stuff, man.
You know what? I had a brother on with me Friday, Professor Mark Sawyer from UCLA.
I really wanted to hear that, man. I'm sorry, I had to do some other stuff.
He was really, really, really good, and he spoke to that what you're speaking about. Said almost the exact same thing. How he's got a problem with the school closings. He's got a problem with charter schools. He kind of shared with us what's going on out in L.A. With charter schools, but he talked about, like you said, how the neighborhood school is the centerpiece of social activity, not just the school,
it really is,
but all civic activity. And he says when you take those away from a neighborhood, you're taking a neighborhood away. And that conversation was really he would have been an excellent panelist on Saturday, because his insight and his area of expertise and study, which is political science and African American studies, would tie
he's done
directly
some stuff on Cuba too, hasn't he?
A lot of stuff. He actually said his area of expertise was Latin America and Cuba.
I have read some of his work on Cuba.
Absolutely, He talked about. Sister Asada Shakur and how he's talked with her, and yes, so he's done a lot of that there. So he's real deep, brother. All right, we've got a bank full of phone calls. We'll get to all of them when we come back talking about the state of Black Congress. Also want to get some opinion from Salim about Bradley Manning. Officer First Class Bradley Manning going on trial today. You talk about, we talk about these leaks that have been going on with the AP and all that's in the news right now.
It's really relevant.
Yes,
yeah, it's really relevant.
It's really a big story, and I want to get Salim's opinion on that when we come back. 7:29. Dave's got WVON News coming up next. 37 on the Talk of Chicago. We've got our Black Music Month feature coming up here, guys, at 7:50. Also, do want to talk about these tornadoes, the latest coming out of Oklahoma. As you guys know, 3 storm chasers were killed. These are veteran storm chasers. And, these guys commit themselves to getting information. They're just not doing it for the thrill. They're doing it for the science, to learn more about tornadoes, and how they can be predicted. It's extremely hard to predict tornadoes. That's why they cause so much damage. They just drop down. The conditions can be right for it, but meteorologists, they cannot predict when a tornado is going to hit. You see a funnel cloud, and that's it. You got about 15 minutes, and that baby's on the ground, and we see the kind of damage that it has done in Oklahoma. Lord knows how scary it has to be to live in that area these days and not knowing when your community potentially could be hit by a tornado. And we see the deadly consequences and people losing their house and losing everything that they own, and some are losing their lives. And so that is a sad situation what's going on down in Oklahoma. Just absolutely terrible. The second weekend in a row, people down there are dealing with what they are dealing with. All right, 591-1690 is the number to call. Salim MuWakkil on the live line with me. Salim, Maurice has been holding since about 6:30. So let's go to his call. Maurice, good morning. You're on WVON.
Good morning, gentlemen. It's worth the wait for you, Salim. How you guys?
Wonderful.
I'm well, Maurice. How are you?
I'd rather be rich. Thanks, Courtney Scott, for communication and cooperation. We got to do that to come up in America. I thank God for waking me up. I thank God I have not sat on 100 panels trying to figure this thing out and ain't got it yet. Wow, Salim.
But at least 100.
That's incredible, man. That's incredible. But look, I'll tell you one panel I would sit on. You asked me Saturday if I might want to sit on one of them panels. Look, one panel I would sit on is Pat Buchanan and Dr. Francis Cress Walton. Why? Because Buchanan's got the book, The Browning of America.
Yeah.
Dr. Walton got the theory of genetic annihilation. I don't know if you guys are getting this, but I'm going to try to put it together. This comes down to a point, one of us has got to go, man. Okay? We once produced capital for these people. Now we want capital, okay? You talk about this guy, Mark. I told you all, after the school situation, there would be something else if we didn't get our economic act together. Now, look, Mark Kirk wants $30 million to lock up more black people. They're not going to change, guys. I'm going to let it go at that. Matt, get this program off the ground. And Maurice White is not the only one that's going to bring something to the world from the west side of Chicago. God bless you, gentlemen. Keep the faith and the money in the family.
All right, good call, Maurice. Let's go to who else is holding on here?
You know, speaking of that, though, Matt, Bobby, Congressman Rush responded because there was a lot of controversy about his comments about what Mark Kirk was talking about, the white boy thing.
Sure.
He said what he's going to do, he's going to give them a reading assignment. Him and Durbin will have to read The New Jim Crow by Michelle Wallace and give him a book report, and then see if they can still maintain their position on this kind of racist dragnet that they're talking about.
But you know what, Salim? My only problem with, and look, you and I and everybody that listens to WVO, we know about the damage that the prison industrial complex does, right? But it was interesting because, as Professor Sawyer said on Friday, the problem with mass incarceration of African Americans is that the majority of them that are being arrested on drug charges, on petty drug charges. So the violent crimes that Mark Kirk was talking about might fall into a little bit of a different category. And I've got to tell you, another story over the weekend that, upsets me. Deontay Maxwell, I believe is his name, the young man, 18 years old, shot and killed, graduate of CVS High School. He's at a party, a little party, a graduation party, I believe it is, on either Friday or Saturday night. Some young guys come in there that were not supposed to be there, were not invited. He asked them to leave, and they shot and killed him in his chest. Now, here's a kid, who went to CVS, was on his way to Rockford College, or actually was going to Rockford College. So you got one 19-year-old and two 16-year-olds that are charged with first-degree murder. And I mean, so when I hear a story like that, and all due respect to Michelle Alexander's book and the prison industrial complex, and I'm all for it in terms of these little petty drug charges that most African Americans are incarcerated with, but these three cats that shot and killed Deontay Maxwell, we need to build more jails for these cats. The cats that killed Hadia Pendleton, let's build some special jails for these cats, because they are doing more harm to us on the street than they would be in being locked up. And in the case of Kevin Ambrose, and in the case of Hadia Pendleton, if these guys had any truth in sentencing, they wouldn't have been out on the street, and those two young people might still be alive. So it's a hard argument to make, and even push in the face of a Mark Kirk.
But it's always that the position that you express is always a danger in society. The people will always get fed up and get caught in symptoms. I think and this is one of the things that was brought up. In fact, I brought it up at this particular Congress, is that we are in dire threat of being engrossed in the symptoms of what we've been exposed to in this country as a people. If we get caught in symptoms, man, we'll never get out of it. We'll always be operating with a deficit, as if there's some innate tendency that inclines us toward criminality. We have to assume the opposite. We have to assume that people don't act like this for without some extreme reason, some social provocation. We don't act like this. Humans do not operate in this way. We are not inherently criminal. There's nothing genetic about us being criminal that accounts for us being 50% of the prison population. Right. There's something at work that we have to deal with and not get lost in the symptoms, man. Because if we do, we'll be at each other's throats in a minute. In a minute. It'll be vigilante day all around Black America. Because of course we don't like this kind of violence. Of course we hate it. But we have to keep it in context. If we don't, we're finished.
I mean, I understand that, but I would rather release the brothers who are in jail on drug charges. And we know, I mean, I know President Obama, they've got some, correction on the crack cocaine to powder cocaine ratio. And I know they're probably working on other issues. President Tony Preckwinkle has talked about relaxing some of these drug charges because county jail is full to capacity, and too many of the cats that are in there, young men that are in there on minor drug charges. See, I think that's an area where we could focus. And you're right. I know the symptoms out there. If we go into unemployment and fatherless homes and everything like that. But
wherever you find poverty, Matt, around the world, you find social dysfunction.
Yeah, but Salim, it's one thing to be, if somebody says, man, people are hungry out here and that's why they're acting the way they're acting, man. They're stealing, they're robbing because. And
then we had that other liability, and that's we were socialized to be dependent as culturally for generations, about 20 generations. That's been our socialization pattern. We've been socialized to be subservient. The fact that we aren't, the fact that we've produced the kind of excellence that we have, despite that, is the amazing story. That's an example of human resilience that's almost unprecedented in the history of man. But,
I agree.
But we have to respect that, but that doesn't. We have to still understand the context that we come out of.
But how do you analyze these cats, these two 16-year-olds and this one 19-year-old, Charles Southern? How do you analyze guys that shoot and kill a young man simply because he asked you guys to leave this party that you were not invited to? I don't know how you analyze. I don't know how we analyze those individuals.
Probably this father. Probably parental guidance growing up. They probably are undereducated. They're probably they felt disowned and disinherited by the educational system, and so they treated it likewise. They reciprocated, and so it spiraled into this whole criminal kind of mentality. The code of the streets took over, and it informs the behavior of too many of our people. Man, we live in a criminogenic community in many cases, where crime is there's an incentive to be a criminal. I know even when I was growing up, man, there was you got status for once being in jail. I mean, people knew if you had a certain boxing stance, we could tell what institution you came from. Mm-hmm. So there were perverse status in that. That was then, and so that's escalated to the point where now, because so many of us have been relegated to prisoner and inmate, it's become even more pervasive in everything we do in our culture, and it's corroding in many ways our culture, and that's why it's extremely important that whatever we can do, man, to ease up this mass incarceration, we have to do it, and as you point out, we have to take advantage of the new attitudes about drug use and whatnot, and use that as a wedge to get us out of prison as much as possible. But we have to also create alternative institutions, and we need resources for that. Mm-hmm. We haven't made the case for it. That's another thing that came out of the Congress, that we need policy institutes. Like everything you see coming out of the GOP is informed by a think tank. They have studies that give them some sort of intellectual heft when they make their argument. We don't have anything like that, and we have to begin to do that more seriously, because there are very compelling reasons for us to take these kind of ameliorative steps, compensatory steps. We can make those reasons, but we just haven't made the argument strong enough yet.
All right, 7:49 on WVON, our Black Music Month history featuring Earth, Wind, and Fire is coming up next, and more with Salim MuWakkil after this. Bad
Can't hide love, well, I bet you
Earth, Wind, and Fire on WVON. So Salim,
you got a pretty nice voice there, man.
Oh, I know. Well, yeah, when I'm in this studio a little bit, yeah. This early morning voice, I get it. As the day goes on, I did some karaoke Saturday night at Deborah Brown's wedding.
Oh,
and,
did you? Okay.
Yeah, so that was funny. I got Carl West on videotape singing some Al Green. I can't wait to show that to people. I'm going to bust Carl out. He was having a good time, though. Everybody had a good time Saturday night. Salim, Private First Class Bradley Manning's going on trial. His trial starts today. Here it is, about 2.5 years after it started. He's going on trial. And this is going to be an interesting trial.
It will be, man, and it coincides with this whole controversy about the Justice Department subpoenaing, if that's the right pronunciation, commanding the AP's records, and it again illustrates how precarious is this balance between the need for national security and yet the need for a well-informed public, the functions that the media performs, and how that balance is always shifting. And generally, you would think in a progressive administration, the shift would be toward media information, toward informing the public. In this particular case, though, it appears that it has shifted in the other direction, toward more surveillance of media access. Mm-hmm. And that's what's troubling to a lot of people, man. And Manning represents that in a certain way because he revealed information, man, that was absolutely damning to the way we were conducting the war in Iraq. And he did it because he thought he had an obligation, as the Geneva Conventions urges people who witness what they consider crimes against humanity to speak up. And if they don't speak up, they're going to be held culpable because following orders is no excuse. That's the classic line out of that ruling. And so Bradley Manning represents someone who saw his duty to inform the public of something he deemed immoral and out of order, a crime against humanity, in fact, massacring people. And so he revealed information in an attempt to shame this country into acting according to his own principles.
Yeah,
and now,
you and I have talked about this before. I just have a problem when a 22-year-old takes that kind of responsibility in his hands. I just think he acted way over his head because, as we're seeing now, what's going on with the AP story, what the government is always going to circle back to is that there is information that is classified information that cannot be released to the public, and you as a soldier have a responsibility to protect classified information. What he did was, and it wasn't just information that he was exposed to, he went and got more information, classified information, and sent it out to WikiLeaks. And I think that's where his big problem was, And even as we're seeing with this AP story, a lot of the thought that's coming out now that, the second week that the story has kind of been out, you're hearing some journalists say that what was going on wasn't whistleblowing. This was just somebody trying to get information and news. It wasn't uncovering, the government doing something sinister. You can't.
Well, in the Fox News case, I think that's true.
Right.
The Rosen case, there's no. I mean, believe me, man. I understand the need for classified information. There's no doubt about it. Sometimes secrecy is necessary for governmental activity, especially in the kind of sensitive era we're living in now. So I'm not excusing, and I'm saying there's always a balance, man. There's certainly a need to safeguard information, but there's also a corresponding need to inform the public, because if you don't, there's every institution wants to make itself look good, and so the government has to be very conscious about what kind of information gets out about it, because it determines how it is viewed in the public, and that's a natural inclination. That's why the press is so important, and that's why it has its own institutional integrity. That's why it's called the fourth estate, because it has a decided role in balancing these two very important values: secrecy and public disclosure. Public transparency. And this administration boasted that would be the most
that's
transparent.
True.
And so it has an obligation, man, to do that.
All right. Salim, as always, check them out Wednesday nights, guys, here 7 to 9. I ran into Cliff Rome the other day. Cliff comes on from 9 to 10. But on Saturdays, 7 to 10, the Salim MuWakkil show. As always, we never have enough time. As always, brother, appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. Talk
to you next week. I know we've got phone calls. I'll try to get to some of the phone calls when we come back. And we're also going to talk some state business as well. You know, state didn't pass a budget. They didn't pass pension reform. They didn't pass gay marriage. They didn't pass casino expansion.